For as long as I could remember, I had the same nightmare. I'd wake up in my dark bedroom, the air thick with silence, and feel a heavy sense of dread. I'd turn my head toward the window, and there, staring in at me, would be a pale face with hollow, dark eyes. It never moved, never blinked, but its gaze pierced through me, filling me with an indescribable terror. I would lie there, paralyzed, unable to breathe or look away, until I finally woke up, drenched in sweat. I told myself it was just a nightmare, just my mind playing tricks. But every night, it returned, the same face, the same lifeless stare. It haunted me for years, following me from childhood to adulthood. I would wake up at 3:15 a.m. every single time, trembling, afraid to look at the window, even though I knew it was just a dream. Then, one winter night, the dream felt different. I awoke, my heart racing, and instinctively turned to the window. But this time, the face wasn't there. The relief was short-lived, as I heard a soft tap, tap, from outside. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch scraping against the glass. But the tapping continued, slow and deliberate, like someone testing the glass. Against my better judgment, I forced myself to look out the window, and there it was, the face from my nightmares, pale and expressionless, staring directly into my eyes from the other side of the glass. This time, it wasn't a dream. The face was real. I stumbled back, my heart pounding as the tapping grew louder, more insistent. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call for help. But when I looked back at the window, the face was gone. I let out a shaky breath, laughing nervously at how real it had seemed. But then, my phone vibrated, and a new message appeared. "Why did you look away?" My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Then, another one came. "I'm coming in." The room grew icy, and a strange, rotten smell filled the air. I felt something behind me, a presence, cold and suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to turn around, but I felt a soft, icy breath on the back of my neck. And then, a voice, barely a whisper. "You looked away? And now I'm here." I screamed, spinning around, but the room was empty. The only sound was the faint creak of the window sliding open. I fled the room, running until I was outside, where the cold night air stung my skin. I looked up at my window and saw the face once more, watching me from inside my own room. No one believes me when I tell them what happened, but every night since, I feel the eyes on me, waiting, watching, closer each time. And now, every night, I hear that same tapping at my window, just waiting for me to look. There was an old legend in town about the forest on the outskirts. Locals called it the Whispering Woods, because they said, if you wandered in after sunset, you'd hear voices calling your name, luring you deeper. No one knew where these voices came from. Those who went in rarely came back. One autumn evening, I found myself drawn to those woods. I couldn't explain why, but something about the shifting leaves and the way the trees seemed to breathe with the wind fascinated me. Ignoring the warnings, I decided to see if the stories were true. The air grew colder as I ventured deeper, the towering trees blotting out the fading light. Soon, the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my feet and the distant hoot of an owl. I felt an eerie calm settle over me, and then I heard it a soft whisper. It was faint, like the wind brushing through the trees, but it distinctly called my name. I stopped, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. I told myself it was just my imagination and kept walking, but the whispers grew louder, closer, circling around me. "Come," they beckoned, "this way." I felt an icy chill as I followed the voices, even though every instinct told me to turn back. Shadows shifted around me. The trees seemed to lean in closer, and the forest floor became thick and damp. The whispers were now more than just voices. They felt like hands reaching out, invisible fingers brushing my arms, my back, urging me forward. And then I saw it, a faint glow in the distance, like firelight flickering through the trees. Mesmerized, I moved toward it, my heart pounding. The glow grew brighter, revealing a clearing in the woods with an ancient stone circle at its center. In the middle of the circle was a lone figure, their face obscured by a dark hood. The whispers stopped as I stepped into the clearing. Silence fell over the forest, heavy and unnatural. The hooded figure raised their head, and even though I couldn't see their eyes, I felt them staring into me, reading my thoughts, my fears. Without a word, they pointed to the ground at my feet. I looked down and gasped. There, half buried in the damp earth, was a mirror, a strange, tarnished relic with carvings of symbols I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I reached down and touched it. The mirror was cold, colder than ice, and as soon as my fingers made contact, a shock ran up my arm, paralyzing me. I looked up, but the figure was gone, and the forest had changed. The trees were twisted, their bark blackened, their branches like skeletal fingers stretching out toward me. And then I saw myself in the mirror, but it wasn't really me. The face staring back was mine, but it was wrong. Its eyes were hollow, its skin deathly pale. My reflection grinned and whispered in a voice that wasn't mine. "You should have stayed away." The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around me, and before I knew it, the mirror's surface rippled, pulling me in. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness. The next morning, hikers found a mirror lying in the clearing, half buried in the earth. And if you listened closely, you could hear faint whispers echoing from within, calling anyone who dared to listen. There's a place on the edge of town known only as the Vanishing Road. It's not on any maps, and most people swear it doesn't even exist. But anyone who's ever taken that road, whether by accident or curiosity, tells the same story, if they come back at all. One autumn night, I found myself driving home alone. I'd taken a wrong turn down an unfamiliar road, and before I knew it, I was completely lost. There were no signs, no houses, just endless trees lining both sides of the road, swallowing up the light from my headlights. The deeper I went, the thicker the fog grew, wrapping around my car like ghostly fingers. I tried to turn back, but no matter how many times I turned around, I ended up on the same stretch of road. That's when I noticed the figure in the distance, a faint, shadowy shape, standing just at the edge of my headlights. I slowed down, squinting, but couldn't make out any details. Then, the figure began walking toward me, ... At first, I thought it was someone who needed help, but as they drew closer, something felt wrong. They moved slowly, almost mechanically, their bodies swaying unnaturally. I couldn't see their face, just a hood pulled low over their head. My instincts screamed to get away, so I pressed down on the accelerator and sped past them. But just a few moments later, they were there again, standing in the middle of the road, closer this time. It was as if they had somehow appeared out of thin air. My heart raced, and I swerved around them, glancing in the rearview mirror as I passed. The figure was now facing me, head tilted, as though watching my every move. I tried to stay calm, driving faster, desperate to get back to familiar roads. But then, the radio crackled to life, filling the car with static, and I heard a voice, soft and distorted. "Why are you running?" Panic gripped me, and I pressed harder on the gas. The road stretched on and on, endless, like it was looping back on itself. The fog thickened, making it nearly impossible to see. And then, I saw them again, the figure, standing directly in front of me, this time with their hood pulled back, revealing a face that was blank. Just empty, smooth skin, with no eyes, no mouth, no features at all. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. My headlights flickered, and for a split second, the car stalled. In the silence, I could hear footsteps approaching, slow and steady. I tried to restart the car, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps grew closer and closer until I could feel a cold presence right outside my window. With a trembling hand, I locked the doors, heart racing as I glanced out the window. The figure was now pressed against the glass, their empty, featureless face somehow staring directly into mine. And then, in a whisper that felt like it was inside my own head, I heard, "You belong here now." At that moment, my car finally roared to life, and I sped away, not daring to look back. The road twisted and turned, and finally, I saw the lights of town ahead. I pulled into a gas station, shaking, barely able to breathe. The attendant noticed my pale face and asked if I was all right. When I told him where I'd come from, his face went white. "People don't come back from the vanishing road," he said, voice barely a whisper. "You're lucky. Next time, you might not be." To this day, I still hear that voice in my dreams. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I catch a glimpse of that featureless face in my rearview mirror, just waiting for me to take that road again. They called it the Last Stop Danera, tiny, run-down place on the edge of town, where the highway meets the wilderness. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting a sickly green glow over the cracked parking lot. The diner was infamous. People who stopped there often didn't make it to their destination. I'd heard the stories, but I was exhausted from driving all night, so I decided to take a chance. The place was nearly empty when I walked in. A lone waitress stood behind the counter, her back to me, seemingly frozen in place. The atmosphere was thick with silence, the kind that presses down on your ears until you feel you can't breathe. I took a seat at the counter, clearing my throat to get her attention. She didn't respond. Then, slowly, she turned around, her movements stiff and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. Her face was pale, eyes blank and lifeless, staring straight through me. "Welcome to the last stop," she whispered in a voice that sent chills down my spine. "What'll you have?" I stammered out an order, watching her shuffle off to the kitchen. I looked around. The diner seemed timeless, frozen in the 1950s, with cracked vinyl seats, a dusty jukebox, and faded photos on the walls. But the strangest thing was that there were other customers, all staring at their plates, motionless. No one spoke, no one moved, like they were waiting for something. Then I noticed a strange sign above the jukebox. "One free wish with every meal." I laughed nervously, thinking it was just some weird joke. When the waitress returned with my food, she leaned in close, her eyes hollow and dark. "Make your wish," she whispered. I froze. A part of me wanted to get up and leave right then, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced around, lowering my voice. "All right, I wish for happiness." For a moment, there was silence. The waitress tilted her head, almost as if she pitied me. She placed a small slip of paper next to my plate and walked away, saying nothing. I unfolded it. Written in spidery handwriting were the words, "You already had it." Confused, I looked up, but she was gone, as were the other diners. The lights dimmed, flickering wildly, and I felt a strange pressure in the air. The silence became a roar in my ears, and my heart pounded as I realized I was the only one left in the diner. Suddenly, the walls seemed to close in, the ceiling lowering. I jumped up, but the door wouldn't budge. I pounded on it, calling for help, but there was no answer. Panic set in as the walls pressed closer, the light dimming until I could barely see my own hand. And then, I heard the waitress's voice in my ear, soft and sinister. "Enjoy your wish." Everything went dark. To this day, people say they still see a figure wandering along the highway, his face a pale reflection in car windows as they drive by. And sometimes, if you pass by the Last Stop Diner late at night, you might see him sitting in there alone, staring blankly, still waiting for his wish to come true. I was exploring a flea market one afternoon when I stumbled upon a strange antique booth tucked in the back corner, covered in dust and shadows. The items were old, much older than anything else in the market: ornate clocks, cracked porcelain dolls, faded photographs. But what caught my eye was a small, beautifully carved music box. It was dark mahogany, with intricate floral designs along the sides and a little golden key at the back. I picked it up, drawn to its charm. The stall owner, an elderly woman with piercing eyes, watched me with a strange smile. "You like it?" she asked in a raspy voice. "It's special." "How much?" I asked. She shook her head, her expression grave. "It's not about money. If you take it, you have to promise. Never play it at midnight." I laughed, thinking it was just an odd gimmick. But there was something in her gaze that made me hesitate before agreeing. I bought the music box, slipping it into my bag, and headed home. As the evening wore on, I found myself thinking about her warning. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't resist. Midnight approached, and I took the music box from my bag, winding the golden key. It began to play a hauntingly beautiful melody, a tune that seemed familiar yet strange, like an old lullaby I couldn't quite remember. But then, the melody slowed, deepening into something darker, more sinister. And as it played, I noticed shadows pooling around the room, stretching across the walls like reaching hands. My heart raced as the air grew cold, and suddenly I felt watched. I stopped the music box, but the tune kept playing, growing louder, more distorted, like a record skipping in the wrong key. The shadows thickened, and then I saw a figure in the corner, cloaked in darkness, with hollow eyes fixed on me. It whispered, in a voice like cracking ice, "You heard the warning," and ignored it. I stumbled back, heart pounding, but my legs felt paralyzed. The figure moved closer, its eyes glowing, its face twisted with fury. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows wrapped around me, cold and suffocating, and the room went dark. When I woke, it was morning, and I was lying on the floor, the music box beside me, silent once again. I thought it had been a nightmare, until I saw the bruises on my arms, in the shape of fingers. I threw the music box into a drawer and locked it. But every night since then, at midnight, I hear that haunting melody play from the depths of the drawer. And sometimes, I swear, I see shadows creeping toward me from the corners of my room, reaching, waiting.